Initially, the idea was to compare IGAD, which is my own region, and the ECOWAS, and that is to draw lessons from the experiences of IGAD and ECOWAS in terms of peace and peace building.
Are they the two most important regional organizations in terms of peace building?
Well, we have selected the 5 regional economic communities, which are regionally based and which represent the 5 regions in the continent. So our first conference was on the IGAD, ECOWAS, which is the east and west part of the continent. And then again we had in Rabat the Arab Maghreb Union, which is in the north, and then the ECAS, which is Central Africa. And now we are having the last one, which is the southern region. Now, why these regional economic communities? In our understanding, REX as a middle way organization, that is between the national state and the African Union, has a strong potential and role to play in peace building. The reason is one, almost all the conflicts, whether it is in the IGAD region, in ECOWAS region, in Central Africa, Southern, or the North, have a regional dimension. They are not confined to national states. That's why regional economic communities as regional organizations have a vital role to peace building, peacemaking, and resolution of conflicts. One is this. And the second is in terms of funding. If you have more than 5, and then usually the fund is coming from outside, there will not be enough funding for peace building. If you simply take every conflict in isolation and separately without gathering them into a regional and having a regional organization which can take responsibility in dealing with those conflicts, there will not be any resource, even the capacity itself. National states have no capacity. The African Union is some way up, which it cannot deal with all the regional conflicts. So, regional economic communities, in terms of being close to the regional conflicts, but also in terms of capacity, where you can mobilize and organize the capacity, whether it's human capacity, whether it's intellectual capacity. At the same time, in terms of funding, it will be easy to fund 5 regional economic communities who can deal with those regional complex conflicts than simply funding all the conflicts in the whole continent, which is consisting of 54 countries. Now, to compare the different regional economic communities, probably ECOWAS is in a very advanced level, both in terms of dealing with conflicts and peace building. They have been successfully involved in countries like Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea-Bissau, and recently Gambia, but also in terms of economic integration. So out of those 5 regional economic community, ECOWAS is in a highly advanced level. Probably in terms of peace and security, which could come next to ECOWAS is IGAD, because IGAD has been involved in conflicts in Somalia, in South Sudan, and before in Sudan and South Sudan. So with that involvement, IGAD could be ranked second in dealing with peace and conflict in the respective region. In economic integration, IGAD has not been successful as ECOWAS. The Arab Maghreb Union virtually doesn't exist. So no one cannot talk about whether the Arab Maghreb Union is dealing with the conflicts in the region, because practically it doesn't exist. The ECAS, the Economic Community of Central Africa, also it is very weak. It has not been able to deal with the conflict in the region, particularly Central Africa, Democratic Republic of Africa, and even Rwanda earlier, and Burundi. So ECAS is extremely weak. When it comes to SADC, SADC is also weak in terms of dealing with peace and security. There was an attempt to be involved in Central African Republic, and probably it was the South African soldiers who were sent to deal with the conflict in Central Africa, but it was disastrous. They couldn't do anything, and a lot of soldiers were killed there, so they have to withdraw. So SADC was not successful in dealing with the conflicts and peace building in the region. But SADC has an advanced success in terms of economy and trade, and some extent also what you call environmental issues. So the 5 regional economic communities, they are at a different level. They have been successful in some areas, but not in other areas. Our expectation from the policy dialogue is we believe dealing with peace building, security, stability, but also economic integration needs a current strong organization. If the idea of African solutions for African problems is going to be materialized, then the continent needs to structure itself. And what we are hoping and what we are proposing is there will be a 3-tier organizational structure. That is national states, the regional economic community, and then the African Union. If you organize in that way, in that manner, then you have the organizational capacity and the organizational strength to deal with all those problems. Now, as I said earlier, the organizational strength has to do with mobilization of resources, both human, material, and intellectual resources. But also it deals with legitimacy. Because if you, in a formal way, institute this 3 level of organizational structure, where you give certain responsibilities and functions to the 3 levels, in a way what we call the principle of subsidiarity. That is, certain functions are given to national states, others are given to the regional economic communities, probably others to the African Union. But also there can be a kind of hybrid where national states and regional economic communities could deal, and at some point regional economic communities, the African Union, and national states will deal with that. So our hope from the policy dialogue, being the final of the 5 regional economic communities we have been working with, is that at the end we could have a clear view and idea of organizing the continent along those 3 levels. That is the national state, regional economic communities, and the African. With that, all the 3 units of the continent would be able to deal in a very efficient and effective manner to deal with all the problems. It's not only conflict, You have conflict, peace and stability. There is unemployment, there is underdevelopment, migration, environmental degradation. So all these problems which have connections and interconnections beyond the national political boundary. But also the whole African continent is suffering of all these problems. So to make reality the proverb African problem is African solution, then the continent has to have a coherent and a strong organization. So our hope is, by promoting this idea, to have a strong organizational structure which stretches from the national state up to the continent through national states, regional economic communities, and the continent as a whole. That is what we are hoping from the policy dialogue on SADC. The same our hope has been when we did the policy dialogue on ECOWAS and the IGAD, but also the Arab Maghreb and the ECAS. That is, how do we make, or how do we contribute to making these regional economic communities effective, structurally, effective in mobilizing their own resources, their own people, and dealing effectively with all the problems the regions are facing, both in terms of conflict, but also in economic development, unemployment, migration, and all this issue. Unless they organize themselves, mobilize their resources, human resources, financial resources, intellectual resources, they are not going to be able to deal with the problems. And all those problems, usually I talk about the pathologies affecting the regions, but also the continent. To deal with them, you need a strong organizational structure, but also in a formal way. Now, there is no formal connection between the national states to the regional economic communities and the African Union. So what we are probably trying to promote and advance is this structure should be formal. And then there is a check and balance coming from the African Union as a continental organization, probably giving guidelines, instructions to the regional economic communities. At the same time, the regional economic communities could also give instructions and guidelines to the national states. But also the regional economic communities need to be given mandates from the African Union as well as from the national states, because they are in between. So if they are given clear mandates where they could intervene and interfere even on national issues, which affects naturally the region, so they have to be given a clear mandate, clear instruction. To do that, you need to have a formal structure. What we have today is simply informal. The African Union could advise, and then probably the African Union needs to also approval from the United Nations, especially from Security Council, when it comes to security issue. Because at the end, it is the Security Council which has the final say if the regional economic community are going to be involved in security issues. But if this is formally institutionalized, then the African Union as a continental organization could have the possibility and the ability to instruct regional economic communities as well as national states. So that is what we are hoping to achieve from not only this, but even from the previous policy dialogues we had.
So in this way, the SADC would get a stronger mandate to intervene on a national problems of different sorts.
Within the SADC countries, now we have the Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, which is in a mess, and what's happening is tragedy. And if the SADC is formally mandated to deal with regional issues, Because we know the government of Democratic Republic of Congo is not going to deal, or they are not able to deal with their own problem. The same with Central African Republic. So the solution and help has to come from outside. But what we mean is from outside, not from outside the continent, even not outside from the region. If the region, that is SADC, is given that mandate, when you give somebody or some organization the mandate, then also you have to give them the instruments they need to implement the policies and projects and plans. So for SADC to deal with those problems within the region, one is they have to be clear mandate. Second, they have to be given the instrument they need so that they can deal. Once in a formal way they are mandated, they're obliged, and they could be accountable if they fail to deal with all those problems. But now, if what is happening is in an ad hoc way, in an informal way, where there is no accountability, where there is no responsibility, they can do it, and if they do it and succeed, it's okay. But if they don't do it, they are not accountable. But if you give them that formal responsibility and structure, they have to do it, they have to succeed, and they will be accountable. So we are hoping by giving these regional economic committees that kind of mandate, with all the resources that will be needed, then they will be able to deal with their problem. So SADC, probably the most urgent problem they have in the region is what is going on in Democratic Republic of Congo and Central African Republic. So we hope we will contribute to that kind of task and that kind of responsibility being given to SADC, and SADC will deal with all the regional problems in their member states. We know, we as scholars, we don't have the power. This is a vision and idea we have. We started with just comparing and drawing lessons from ECOWAS and IGAD, but then on the way we discovered this could also be done with the rest of the regional economic communities. In a way, we are also challenging the African Union that they have to have this kind of strict and coherent and clear organizational structure. So we as scholars, we can generate ideas and vision and view, but it is not we who have the power to implement them. So what we hope is to anyone who has the influence and the power to probably take this idea and make it concrete. We trying in our this policy dialogue, this is what vision we have, and we see this probably if not the only way, but the most probable way to deal with all the pathologies the regions as well as the whole continent is suffering. So it's only to appeal to anyone who could influence in having implementing this idea. We hope that there will be those who are in power, those who are at position to influence policies, make ideas and views material and implementable, to be part of this idea and help us to try our vision, make it reality.